Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, a podcast exploring intimacy, romantic relationships, sexuality, and everything that relates to these hot topics. We're going in. Are you ready? This is your host, Laura Aisha. Let's do this. Okay. Yes. So good to be here today with you, Matthew.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
All right. So we're just going to start with a little meditation, align our energies, give our community an opportunity to do the same. So just, taking a moment, if you're somewhere safe and stable, you can let your eyes get heavy or close your eyes, and we're just going to turn our gaze inward. And just start to notice the breath. And just allowing everything that's been in our space up until this point, we're just going to put it to the side. And we can address it at another time. And just really grounding into the energy and turning our gaze inward. And just noticing if there's any tension anywhere in the body, and noticing the breath, and just really giving thanks for this opportunity to be here together today and together whenever this podcast recording will be received by anyone who's going to listen to it. I'm just asking that Matthew and I be the clear, open, divine channels that we be, so that whatever is needed to be received by anyone who will ever listen to this episode, that it comes through us with ease and grace and clarity. And let's take 3 nice, big, deep, long breaths in and out together. I'll guide us through these breaths, and we'll start with a nice, big, deep belly inhale. And exhale. And inhale. And exhale. And inhale. And exhale. All right. What is happening? Here we are, Ignite Intimacy community. It's so wonderful to be with you for another episode. I'm here with someone that I connected with through Instagram. I saw a picture of him naked in the woods outside of Mount Shasta, and I was like, we haven't really talked about just nudity on the podcast. So I reached out to you, Matthew. And I was like, can we talk about this for my podcast?
Hell yeah.
So
it's so interesting that post is what started this. And yesterday I received a notice from Instagram saying them removed.
Really?
And so I've actually put up a poll on my Instagram account asking if I should repost it. I don't actually need a poll. I was going to repost it anyways, but I was so baffled because it's fully covered. It is me standing on a rock in the woods at Mount Shasta, and I'm covering anything that anyone might find offensive. And somebody flagged it. And it's really interesting to see how many people, after I've posted that it was flagged, are reaching out and being like, this is absolutely ridiculous. There's women who post way more revealing things on their accounts that just live up there. And I think it would be perfect to to talk about that, like the way in which the world views like male sexuality and nudity versus female, and how like acceptable it is for one and not quite the other.
Mm. Well, and it's funny. Okay, so we've got Matthew on the line, the healing Matt, and he's currently in Colorado, Boulder, right?
Yeah, Boulder right now.
Cool. So he is on a worldwide journey, and we're going to get more into Matthew's story, which is awesome. I'm currently doing some nomading myself, so it's really exciting to be in different zones and popping in and out, and so we're going to get into all of that. However, I want to just start with this topic of nudity, because something that I know a lot of women are talking about is that nipples, women showing their breasts in imagery on social media, is getting flagged and images taken down because their nipples are showing. When men can have their nipples out all day long and nobody cares about it. So there's this interesting thing happening, right? With like, what is okay, what is not okay, the difference of perspective, right? Because what I heard from you, Matthew, is like, women can be online sharing all sorts of different sexy photos and revealing, photos, or half naked or all naked, or, whatever it is. And why am I getting flagged and my image is being taken down when actually like anything that should be covered is covered, or that not should be, but needs to be covered is covered. So it's an interesting conversation, because I know depending on who you talk to, there will be a very different perspective, right?
Yeah, entirely.
Well, and okay, so yeah, so you have this whole thing about nudity, right?
Yeah. I don't know the whole thing, but I'm very comfortable with it. I'm very comfortable with nudity and my own, like, I guess my own journey with just embracing it, whether it's like a nude beach or Burning Man, or just being comfortable walking around, in my apartment as such. And I kind of always grew up not like fully embracing nudity, but in a household that was much more like accepting of human bodies and the fact that it's such a natural state of being. Like I remember being a kid, we'd go to Europe and the beaches in Europe were mostly nude, and it wasn't ever anything that I considered to be a big deal. And it's interesting though, because so many people have an aversion to it. And I think a big part of that is like the hyper sexualized personification of nudity within our society and within our culture. Like nipples have been sexualized through the breast. That is this like, hyper sexual thing that people can point to and be like, oh, sexuality is bad. And that nipple, represents sexuality, and therefore it's bad and should be kept secret. There's a lot of shaming around it. And it's definitely something that, I talk about in my community and with my friends. And it's constantly a conversation that comes up is, where does that discomfort actually lie? Like where does that cultural shame stem from, as we all come from different cultural backgrounds, different, religious beliefs and countries of origin. So it's just interesting to see, specifically in Western civilization, this, I wouldn't say discomfort, because I think that's changing, but just there's like a distortion with why people think it should be bad and how they're responding to it. Like it's like this conditioning. It's like, oh yeah, bad, as opposed to actually being like, well, what is it about this that makes me uncomfortable? Like actually looking at why somebody would feel offended by a woman having a nipple in a photo, or breastfeeding, or a man, nude, covering anything that would, need to be covered.
Yeah, I know it's so interesting, because I've thought about this too a lot. And you think of kids in France and they go to the beach as, teenagers, and girls are topless and it's
Uh-huh.
no big thing. It's like, this is my body. This is a part of my body. It's different than a man's body. And it's not this like over sexualized thing that people go crazy about.
Yeah, I think that's a big distinction. And that was actually and that's what you and I talked about before this podcast. That was a big part of the post that I wrote that will be going back up. Nudity doesn't have to equate sexuality.
Yeah.
Yes, we are like when it comes to sacred sexuality or physical intimacy or connection in that way, more often than not, we end up nude. But the distinction between that, it doesn't have to always be that correlation. There can be nudity that isn't hypersexual, that is really just, it's creative expression in its purest form,
Yeah.
I believe.
Well, and it's like, it's almost like sweet and just present. I was actually just talking with someone about this recently in the last few days. And when I was 16, I left home and I went, oh, was it you? Maybe it was you when we spoke a couple of days ago. And, and I remember having this freedom around nudity and not feeling any particular way about it, even though I grew up in a heavily, heavy-handed Roman Catholic household. There was a lot of shame around sex and sexuality and my body. However, there was something that allowed me to be open with my physical body in a way that was just what it was, and whether I was showering in a, open shower at a rainbow gathering and there were hundreds of people around, or I was showering in the bathroom at a juvenile detention center that I was in New Jersey when I was 16, and just really freely walking around naked and it didn't even occur to me that was, that there was anything like weird or wrong about that to other people, right? Like I was just really free about it. And through that way of being, I remember in particular in this girls' bathroom at this detention center that, the girls were just kind of like, wow, like that's kind of cool. Like it's kind of cool that you don't have anything about it. You're just here, and it's not sexual and it's just like, here I am. I just got out of the shower. There are 5 other girls in the bathroom and it's just, and here I am, with my towel on my head instead of wrapped around my body.
Yeah. And that's the ironic thing is like, that's all of us, like all of us under all of this and out of the shower. And when we get ready in the privacy of our home or wherever, we're all here in our flesh suits. So why is it that makes so many people so uncomfortable? And I think, a big part of that has to do with like the way in which many people grew up in very religious households. And another part of that is just the way in which our society in general has shamed it or like vilified it almost.
Yeah, or over sexualized it, right?
Yeah. Like you're slutty if you're naked or if you show too much skin or like you're a player or whatever it is that has traditionally been attached to this belief of, if you're comfortable with nudity, then here are the negative connotations that I can attach to who you are as a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting. There's a brand that has done some huge advertising in some of the subways here in New York City. And I can't remember if the brand is her or if it's she. I'm not remembering in the moment. However, it is this brand that is advertising women's undergarments. I wouldn't call it lingerie, but certainly like panties and bras. And I may be meshing 2 different companies. I hope I'm not. And if I am, whatever. And what I remember seeing are images of women breastfeeding in panties and a bra that are so beautiful, and other images of women that don't have six packs, that have stretch marks, where the photos are not retouched, in panties and underwear, or panties and bras. And it's so powerful, and I love it. And this whole thing around hiding breastfeeding, to me, exhibits where we are, at least in the United States, around bodies, breasts, sexuality, tying together the beautiful and natural and sacred act of a baby breastfeeding from their mother's breast with sexuality. And yeah, I just find it, I'm really curious about the whole thing.
About the campaign in general, or just about the way in which it's been shamed?
The way it's been shamed. I love the campaign.
Yeah.
We need more of that. And more people are starting to come out saying, like, there's, like, breastfeeding is normal. It's natural. It's not something that you should have to do in private. And it's really up to the mother as to how she wants to cover herself or not, where she wants to breastfeed. It's breastfeeding and bottle feeding are how you feed babies. So whether you're breastfeeding or bottle feeding, it's really, I believe it should be up to the mother and what her comfort level is about where she wants to do it and when.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think there's any reason to, like, you're providing nourishment for life that you just created. I mean, it doesn't get more primal than that, as far as, like, our purpose. Like, regardless of what esoteric beliefs you hold around why we are all here in this, age and time and life, at the end of the day, we are here to create. We are here to create life. We have been engineered as such. And once that life has been created, we get to nourish that and provide for that. And, the men get to step into these provider roles of creating the safety for that nourishment, for that life to grow. And the women, the mother, gives this life energy. It gives it food and sustenance. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, it literally does not get more primal as far as, like, why we're here than that.
Yeah.
And it's like, let's shame that.
Yeah.
Let's make women feel worse about themselves by saying, hey, the most natural thing that you could be doing once you give life, that's bad.
Okay, so I have a question for you. And what I first want to just share with our community is that, so I connected with Matthew online, and I saw this post about his freedom around nudity, it inspired something in me and my own connection to my own freedom around nudity. And it caused me to reach out and say, hey, let's connect. Let's do a podcast about this. And then what I found in the process is that Matthew's actually in this hugely transformational time in his life. And, Matthew, you're making, like, major shifts and changes, and you're really diving deep into what is masculinity? Who are you as a sexual and a relational being, And so that's something that we're going to be diving more into. And it comes off the heels of me attending incredible event that was produced and put on by Esther Perel this weekend, all around the masculinity paradox. And, many people having this conversation about, like, what is masculinity and the rise of the feminine, and attaching masculine to males and feminine to females, and, what all of this means, and which ways men have been programmed to be certain ways, which have taken men away from, like, the fullness of who they, who, I don't know, maybe 1,000 years ago were, as opposed to who men have been conditioned to be over the last 300 to 500 years. So we're going to be touching on, it's a pretty deep topic, and we're going to be touching on, some of that in our conversation today. And what I'm curious about Matthew, is were you breastfed as a baby?
Oh man, I'd have to get my mom on the line for that one. I, I believe so. I'm fairly certain that I was. My mother was born in Germany. She's European, although I grew up in Canada, and she moved to Canada when she was quite young. Her mother being British and also very, like, her mother is my like spiritual vocal point. It's this like wise old sage and is very liberal and open. I would imagine so. I actually believe there's a photo that I can recall seeing, like a family photo of like a birthday party, and my mom's just breastfeeding me at that table. So I would say like 99% certain yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So because I'm curious about your relationship with your mother.
We have we're rebuilding a new relationship now. Not rebuilding, we're evolving our relationship presently. She gave me a lot of my spiritual backbone and my my curiosity around kind of something bigger than all of this. And I I came from I came from I was in a 14-year relationship that was a 7-year marriage. And when I left that, I came into my full like spiritual conscious awakening. That was about 2.5 years ago. During that marriage and relationship and part of my life that was very much a lot of like unconscious behavior, our relationship was very much around the things that I was doing, like how I was creating, what I was making, and all of that. And with my growth and my transformation, a big part of my life right now is how I am being, is my the healer that is here, the coach, the very deeply rooted spiritual individual who does this masculine men's work. So only in the past like year and a half have we started to reestablish a new relationship in talking about things that are kind of much broader and esoteric, and really I'm seeing a lot of like personal development within her as I go through my own transformation. I'm witnessing it come through with her as well. So our relationship is ever evolving. And I thank her all the time for the triggers that are still present, as as well as like the beauty and nurturing that I feel that is there. It's a polarity.
Yeah, yeah. And so I'm curious if you have done some exploration into any parallels that exist between your relationship with your mother and the intimate and sexual romantic relationships that you've had with women as an adult.
I think the start of most personal development for men is taking a look at how their mothers have shown up for them in relationship. Um, that's like for me, and especially when coaching people, it's like it's a big part of what you start to look at, because they become our biggest teachers. Like the way in which we were raised, how we were shown love, how we witnessed intimacy and relationships, not like sex, but how we witnessed, our mothers interacting with our fathers and with their friends and whoever. That becomes this reference point for that which we want to call in based off of how we've been conditioned to receive and witness love. So as we go into relationship, of course, we're going to have this vibrational frequency that is calling out the love that we've witnessed for the majority of our life. I believe as we come into a deeper level of conscious awareness and conscious awakening, we begin to look at the ways in which love has been exemplified to us that actually doesn't serve us. The ways in which it showed up based off of a representation that we were given, that we were subject to as a child or a teenager or a young adult or whatever. And we get to look at, okay, well, how do I actually want to receive love? How do I actually want to give love? What is actually in alignment for my being, not based off of something that somebody else went through with their own, life's history of conditionings and belief systems and filters. So most definitely, I've looked at that in depth of, okay, well, especially with the last relationship that I've come out of with my former beloved, after 2.5 years, we uncoupled kind of over the summer. And that was a complex untethering process. And coming out of that, a huge part of my journey after that and still ongoing is recognizing what triggers were present in that relationship. How did I show up, and how did how I showed up affect her? And how did I show up, and how did she showing up affect me? And where were those triggers? And then
Yeah.
dissecting those into what belief systems was I given as a child, and how was that exemplified to me?
Yeah. Amazing. So, okay. So I want you to take us back into your life and like share with us a bit about, just growing up, like who were you as, a boy and a young man in the world, and where did the inspiration and attraction for like, sexuality and love and intimacy, where did that really start to come alive? When did that really start to come alive for you?
When did that start to come alive for me? So when I was a kid, I was very much into like energy and energy work and rocks and crystals and healing and all of these modalities that I'm embracing now. And I've only started to have these memories come back up recently. I kind of like studied that and would practice with that. And my nana would teach me like different energy techniques. And when I was a teenager, I would like cast spells in my basement by candlelight, like in the dark.
Wow.
And I had this like book of spells, and I would collect herbs and different like plants from the garden and the store, and just like I'd do this like spell casting in my basement as like a 12 and 13-year-old. And I always had a hard time fitting in as a kid. Go figure, I'm casting spells in the basement.
That's awesome.
And when I was about 15, just before my 16th birthday, I had sex for the first time. It was up at my like summer cabin in northern Canada, and she was a couple years older than me, and we connected and had sex, and it was amazing. It like opened this whole world of like, holy shit, this changes everything for me.
You're like,
So
wow,
coming,
there's that. Oh man,
uh-huh,
sweet.
uh-huh. Coming back into high school then from that summer with this like newly awakened sexual energy, I had a very like unhealthy relationship with sex and the way in which I related to people. Not I didn't unhealthily relate to people, but I didn't really have friends. I didn't know how to make friends. So my way of connecting with friends was through the relationships that I had. So I would have, a girlfriend for a short period, and I'd be friends with all of her friends, and we'd be intimate and connect, and then the relationship wouldn't work out, and then shortly thereafter I'd fall into another relationship, and I'd be friends with their friends. And this went on all through high school and the first year of college. And I never really found my footing as far as how to relate with men, how to relate with women in a non-sexual manner. Like my relationship was, I'm either in a sexual relationship with a woman, and I'm friends with women that are friends with the woman I'm in a sexual relationship with, or I'm friends with men that are friends with the woman I'm in a sexual relationship with. So I never established personal connections with people outside of the container of the relationship, and I was always through
Interesting.
them.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that went up until I was about 19, and I started dating a woman who would become my wife years later. And I recognized that this was such a beautiful and safe relationship for me to be in. And it was everything that I thought I wanted based off of the lifestyle that I had been shown, based off of, this is what a relationship looks like. This is what, your home will look like. But it never quite resonated for me. There was a big part that felt out of alignment within my heart, especially kind of, a year or so into the marriage. It just felt off. And not knowing how to communicate about that, not knowing how to actually have conscious conversations around desire and connection, I began having an affair. And that had this excitement and stimulation that I was receiving, like sexual energy that I wasn't feeling in the marriage. And I'm completely emotionally unattached from both, because I'm in this purgatory of, I'm just really not happy in either of these
Wow.
situations.
Yeah, and then there's no space that you're expressing that, right? So it's like you're not communicating what needs to be communicated to your wife, And then that non-communication turns into the expression of an affair, right? So, and then was there also a lack of communication with the woman that you were having an affair with about what was really going on for you, or were you able to actually open up to that person?
I wasn't able to open up with myself. I didn't give myself the space to actually think about what was happening. I had numerous panic attacks back then where I would actually faint and just become so overwhelmed with how much pressure I felt from, this is the life that I think I need to be living. And everybody that I ever knew told me that this was how I was supposed to be living, but it doesn't feel right. And I feel so ashamed of myself that I have these desires and I want to connect with somebody else. And that like I projected so much guilt and shame onto the desires. Yes, I was entirely out of integrity, stepping outside of the container of our relationship entirely. I own that. But what I don't need to own is the shame for holding the desire to want a deeper level of sexual connection, a deeper level of intimacy. The way I went about it, yeah, that's not in alignment. But what I recognize is when I left, the marriage, the affair, when I finally like mustered the strength and had this like shift, all of a sudden there was an energetic shift. And I'm like, okay, now I can have this conversation. When I left that and shortly thereafter came into this conscious relationship, the relationship that I was in gave me the opportunity to begin to have conversations around desires outside of our container. Not like just creating a safe space to say, hey, listen, I had this fantasy and I want to talk to you about it. And it doesn't mean we have to act out on it. I just want a safe space to talk about it. Or, hey, this desire has been present for me for, God knows how long. Let's actually just talk about it and look at how that would make you feel. And if you're not comfortable expressing that desire, that's totally fine. But I want to create the container for us to have those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in relationship, we shame so much just the fact that we hold desires. Those desires don't have to be acted upon, but we shame the fact that we hold them. So many people I work with say, I love my husband, or I love my wife, or I love my partner, and I have a desire to have a threesome, or I have a desire to go to Burning Man and go to the shower camp or whatever it is. And I'll say, oh, well, why don't you actually have that conversation? I say, well, I'm afraid that they'll say no. So, okay, well, if they say no, are you still okay with that? I said, yeah, of course. So, well, then we get to create the container for you just to speak your truth. Yeah. Because what if they say yes? If they say yes, then that might be a really beautiful opportunity for the two of you to actually deepen your love for one another, your connection with one another.
Exactly. And what if they say, I've had that same thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been afraid to say that.
So yeah, I just actually met someone at the Esther Perel event on Saturday, and he was telling me he's been in a relationship with his wife for 20 years, and they have one child, and I think it sort of started because he was picking up his wife from yoga one night, and he was sitting there in the car. She walked out of the studio, and a man either walked out with her or, and they were talking. And then he noticed that, the conversation stopped somewhat abruptly and the man walked away. And when his wife came in the car, he asked, who was that? And she said, oh, it's just this guy, whatever. And he asked me out. And I told him that, I have a husband. And so he just kind of he put his head down and said, oh, I'm sorry, and just walked away. And there was something about that for the husband to see another man be attracted to his wife that created this whole opening in their relationship. And they started talking more about their own relationship, their own sexual connection. And as a result, this man realized that it turns him on to know that other men find his wife desirable, and that now there's and he's not that necessarily either one of us is going to go outside of the marriage. However, we've started having these conversations that has literally unleashed this energy in our sexual relationship. And after all these years being together, we are straight fucking again like we did when we were first together. And there's like all this fire and all this passion that got unleashed in the expression of something that was there but just wasn't being communicated.
Yeah. What a beautiful gift.
Really. Yeah. And I know from my own experience, and just can be terrified no matter what it is and who I'm talking to, if it's the landlord or my client or my partner or my sister, whatever, I can really get anxiety about what are they going to say? And that question can create this huge barrier. What I have to remind myself is like, what if they say exactly what I want them to say? Like what if there's this whole opening? What if, it can create so much beauty and connection and something much deeper. And it certainly can just open up a dialogue. Even if at first somebody gets triggered by something or they're upset about something, it creates a space from which you can start to have a new conversation.
Yeah, fully. And I think that's the most valuable thing, not just for like sex and intimacy, but just relationships in general, whether it's a romantic relationship, a friendship, or like a business partnership, is creating the safe container to know that you can speak your truth and have it held. Mm-hmm. And from that space, you can then navigate. Because if you're holding back, then like what's the point? If you can't be in your fullest expression of yourself, then why would you want to be in that dynamic?
Exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just giving those in our lives permission to express themselves. And that's something that, I've learned many times in life, quite often the hard way, and more recently, a little bit easier, like with a deep level of awareness around how we create containers, how we communicate, and how we navigate all that we desire to speak to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious about something, because it always amazes me how people go from one long-term relationship into another. And and a lot of it is because I've been primarily single most of my adult life. And so I'm always curious about what I would call like serial relationists. And so what was it like for you to go from this 14-year relationship to this next longer term relationship?
There wasn't another way for me to do it for my soul's evolution. I'll say that up front. What I recognize that was difficult to hold in the relationship was, as I came into my spiritual awakening and as she accelerated hers, both of us having come out of pretty impactful relationships before. She was married before as well, and had about 4 to 6 months of being quote unquote single. Both of us coming into this relationship, we grew exponentially on our spiritual journey, on our like emotional understanding of the self, on our personal development. We gave each other permission to talk about sex and sexuality. Like a big part of our relationship was exploring our sexuality and what feels good and how do we want to do this. And like we had this profound sex life, but that also prevented us from using that creative energy in other outlets. And with so much passion, and also both coming out of previous relationships, we processed a lot of our old relationships in that relationship.
Wow.
And it was so beautiful because there were times when we were able to really hold each other in that and navigate and understand it. But I recognize the value at this point in my life, now coming out of that relationship and having, amazing men in my life and friends in my life that are solid pillars to me. I recognize the value in processing relationships with like non-sexual intimate partners, the ability to navigate, coming out of that untethering and that detangling and coming back to self. But as you come back to self, having like a non-intimate reflection that will allow you to be in that process and navigate that process.
Yeah.
Because it's hard going from a 14-year relationship into a spiritual awakening conscious relationship. And, I recognize that a lot of my processing of the relationship before bled into that relationship.
I could imagine.
So
I could imagine, and so I just listened to your conversation on Adam Roa's podcast, and you guys talked about how, because you both were in long-term relationships, and you guys mentioned how you are being just super aware around not just defaulting into relationship again.
Yeah. I think I recognize that at this point in my life, there are a few things that are very present for me. I get to come home to myself first and foremost and really identify who I am as a sovereign being. There's so much of me as I came out of that relationship that desired to create connection out of lack. Like, yes, there's beauty in creating connection. There's beauty in alchemizing energy. There's beauty in relating with new energies and new souls. I recognize that. And what prevented me from really like feeling into that was I see there's a part of me right now that feels a lack. I feel there's a part of me that is missing something. As a result of leaving this relationship, I feel this like, oh, like something feels off because I've had it for so long and I'm trying to fill that. And I don't want to enter any container where I'm feeling that lack, because then I'm coming in with that thing that is missing. And if I can't fill it myself, then I'm always going to be searching for something that doesn't exist within myself.
Totally.
So first and foremost, it's been looking at that. And I mentioned that, as a kid and a teenager, I was into like witchcraft and energy healing. And then I found sex, and sex like shut that off for me for a big part. And my last relationship, the conscious relationship that I was in, awakened this whole new like energy healer. Our like level of intimacy awakened this whole new connection with the divine. And now where I'm at is I'm really honing the energetics that exist within the ability to kind of be in those containers. Like how do I channel, that creative energy, that sexual energy within myself first, creating like a tantric breath practice and navigating energy within my body and just circulating it so I can then tune into that kid that was training at such a young age to be this wizard alchemist.
Amazing.
Because sex shut that off for me. So first and foremost, it's about coming home to myself and really tuning into that and seeing how I can deepen levels of intimacy. And this is something that I talked about on Adam's podcast on the deep dive, is how do I create deep levels of intimacy without defaulting to physical intimacy, to sex, to relationship? How do I allow myself just to be present with a man or a woman and have an eye gaze or like breath work, or just embrace one another and cultivate an intimate container without saying, oh, this means that we have to have sex.
Totally.
This means that we have to, take our clothes off and see where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like, now what? It's like you can be, that's the thing about intimacy. It's so beautiful. It can be shared with a complete stranger. It can be shared with anyone. And it's not necessarily sexual. It certainly can be sexual, and it certainly doesn't have to be sexual and isn't sexual, and that's a human to human thing. We're not meant to be sexual with everyone, However, there is an opportunity to be intimate with each other in a way that is just so beautiful. And like I said, just like human to human, spirit to spirit. Okay. So I'm like, we could jam for like 3 hours right now, because the past 47 minutes have just like blown by. So I want to just touch on a couple of things though. So you have your career has been like really powerful, really dynamic. It sounds like you hit a level of success pretty early on in your career. So just give us a snapshot into, your career in as a producer in Los Angeles and some of the work that you were doing. And then I want you to share with our audience what you're up to now.
Yeah. When I was in college, I studied media and advertising and specifically developed a high school curriculum on the damaging effects of advertising to society. Began to break down the way in which men and women were overtly sexualized for ad campaigns to sell, products, this unrealistic image of what beauty was. And I had this idea that I was going to go back and become a professor and start studying media and society. I went down to LA that summer to help my, at the time, girlfriend, now ex-wife, get settled into 1 year of school. I got an internship at a production company, and that turned into a job which led to a career. And very quickly, I found myself immersed in the industry that I had really focused so much attention on how damaging it was to society. So finding myself in, the music video and commercial world, involved in these campaigns that were really beautiful and, had a lot of really creative genius that went into these, and they were perpetuating a world that I didn't really buy into for a long time. This hyper consumerist society. That said, I got swept up in it and began producing commercials and music videos and did a lot of really big videos for Katy Perry and Jay Z and Beyonce and Alabama Shakes and Beach House and 2 Chainz and loved it. Loved the people I was meeting, the connections I was meeting, but something was out of alignment. And coming out of marriage and affair and into my conscious awakening, I focused my attention on creating content that could actually affect change and could ultimately elevate the consciousness of the planet. That's what I'm here to do. And started calling that in and reshifted, found, new companies to work with and new ventures to dive into. And in that curiosity, I found my tribe and I found my community, and am now at this place where, after traveling the world for more or less the past year in 3 to 4 month intervals, I was settling back into LA recently after coming back from India and separating from this relationship. And I was meditating daily on how do I alchemize the healer and the transformational life coach and the body worker and this energy that's coming through so strong as who I am. How do I alchemize that with the producer, with the content creator, with the creative? And Adam Roa, who's a dear, dear brother, had just uncoupled and started filming his show, The Art of Choosing Love. And Ryan Fontana, who's also a dear brother and friend of mine, and him were on it. And I said, hey, listen, I want to get involved. I have my producer mindset and skill set, and I'm in the work with you guys. And we had Adam was like, let me think about it. And a month later, he's like, all right, I figured it out. I know how we can make all this work. And I came on probably about end of August. I came on, or mid-August, and am now with these 2 guys, and the show's taken a shift where a big part of it is about our brotherhood and what we're creating. And we are traveling the world making a show called The Art of Choosing Love, which is really about what it looks like to choose love over fear in every moment. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a man in 2018? How do we embrace our masculine energy and hold the rising feminine within us and within society? How do we become role models of a masculine archetype when all we were given is role models of toxic masculinity? Not all, but a lot of what we were shown is toxic masculinity. So we're diving deep into those issues and topics and really unfolding them in an incredibly vulnerable way. The cameras are on us at all times. We're in a deep, deep process at all times. And we're presently, the show's kind of taken a shift where we're now diving deep into sexuality and what that looks like. The last episode we released, Adam shared for the first time publicly about how he was molested as a child and how that energetic has been stored in his system and shown up in countless avenues of his life. And now we're just dissecting, what sexuality means and why he's felt shame around it and why so many people in society feel shame around it.
Amazing.
So that's what we're creating and making, and we're off to Bali tomorrow. And
yeehaw!
yeah,
That's amazing. Okay, so well, how can people find you online? Like, are these shows being? Are they out in the world yet? Or can we watch it? Or
they are. Yeah, we have 12 episodes out on YouTube. The Art of Choosing Love. We can go to theartofchoosinglove.com is our landing page, artofchoosinglove.com/tribe if you want to join our private Facebook group, which is a community safe space just to talk about everything that is coming up for everyone. And then on Instagram, I'm at the Healing Matt, 2 T's. Same with Facebook, or my personal website is MatthewAyriss.com.
Beautiful. So theartofchoosinglove.com, also theartofchoosinglove.com/tribe. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And then on social at the Healing Matt, MATT, and then MatthewAyriss.com with 2 S's. We'll have all of those links in the show notes. Well, this has been amazing and fascinating, and it's so wonderful to experience your journey through your story and through the work that you're doing in the world. I can't wait to check out some of these episodes.
Yeah, the last one's incredibly powerful. So I suggest having some space to watch it.
Thank you so much, Matthew. And, just wishing you and the guys an incredibly blessed, magical, sacred journey as you head full on into the belly of the mother in Bali. What
yes.
Sacred feminine energy there is on that island. I'm with you all in spirit. I can't wait to see you at some point in person. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Great. Well, Ignite Intimacy community, you heard it here. Matthew Ayriss, the Healing Matt. Check him out, theartofchoosinglove.com. And if you have any questions whatsoever about this episode, you want us to connect you to Matt, holler at us, hello@igniteintimacy.com. And we love y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's such a blessing and just beautiful process to be here on this journey with all of you. And until the next one, stay blessed and ciao for now. Thanks for tuning in to another conversation on the Ignite Intimacy podcast hotline. We love that you choose to spend your time with us. Check us out at igniteintimacy.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes and leave us a review and a rating. It helps more people know about us. We love to hear from you. You can email us with questions, comments, or suggestions to hello@igniteintimacy.com. And tell your friends. Music was arranged by Jason Pfaff and Mike Corey, and this podcast is produced by yours truly, Laura Aisha. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, let your light shine bright and ignite your intimacy.